Welcome back to SIMRIGHT Fashion Academy YouTube channel for another interesting tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll be teaching you how to sew this beautiful pointy bustier with yoke and handkerchief flay. So you can see it has a beautiful sleeve attached to it. Actually, the fabric I used here for the upper part is chiffon, and I use net for the down part of it. So to begin this tutorial, you need your full basic bodice pattern for the front. So because the dress is asymmetric, it is pointy on one side, so I made a full basic bodice pattern. So from my shoulder down to the waistline, I've already made the lines, bust point, under bust, chest line. Right now, we are going to mark out the line that will create the asymmetric bustier for us. So I'm just trying to cross-check how this asymmetric line is going to run. So on the right side of the pattern, I'll come down by 3 inches, and I'm going to make a line from the bust point to that 3 inches. So I'll place my ruler this way and create that line. So I've already created it. You can see how I placed my ruler into the both armholes, okay, to the right armhole and to the left armhole, just from that 3 inches. You can see how I placed my pattern ruler to create the pointy part of this. So after creating that shape, the next thing we are going to do is to contour the underbust. So for the underbust contouring, I took my underbust circumference divided by 4, and whatever I had remaining there, I put 0.25 in the front and the rest at the back. I always use this pattern to contour my underbust, but you can use any pattern or method that is good for you. So I'm connecting back from the underbust to the waistline. So I'm virtually going to also divide my shoulder into 2 and connect to the bust point, because we want to create the over bust line. So on the over bust, I come out by 0.75 on both sides to contour the over bust, or to tighten the over bust. So here you can see the darts. We are going to cut it off. I'll divide my shoulder on the left hand side and connect it to the bust point too. Wherever it crosses the line, I'm going to go in 0.5 out and in like that to contour the over bust on the right side as well. The same thing I did on the left side, that is what I'm exactly doing at the right side too. So I'll connect it accordingly. So I'll also go ahead and contour the under bust on the other part. So because this is asymmetric neckline, so you contour on both sides, okay, because they are not the same. So I'll connect back to the waistline, and we are done with this pattern. So after the front pattern, because we are actually done, the bust dart is 2 inches. So we are going to go over to the back of this dress. Drafting the back of this dress is actually very simple. So I just imputed my back measurements, okay. The chest line and the length of the waist is shorter than the front because of the bust dart technique. So I will just contour the center back by 1 inch, and then from that contour line, I'll start taking my bust divide by 4 and my waist divide by 4 accordingly. So I just replace the back contour line on the side. So the next thing we are going to do is to create out the yoke. You can see me drawing that line to connect the chest line where the yoke is created. Now we want to move over to the neckline. So I'll come in by 3.5 from the armhole, 3.5 inches, and come in by 1 inch from the zipper line. That is how I want to connect my neckline. So I'll just connect the neckline as you can see. So here is the yoke, and this is the dartless back, okay. So the back is dartless. So the next thing we'll do is to go ahead to cut this pattern. So here you can see me cutting the back pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and follow the lines and cut out my back pattern accordingly. So after I'm done cutting the back pattern, then we are going to also cut the front pattern. So we'll be using the front pattern to cut the black chiffon fabric part, okay. So here we are using a black chiffon to make the inner dress. It's going to be a full dress, a full dartless dress inside. So you can see me cutting by the size of the dress, of the pattern. I'm not really going to cut out anything, so I'll just place my yoke and mark out my neckline accordingly. So that is the neckline width, and the neckline depth I will just come in by 3.5 inches and connect like that. So now I'm going to cut the size of this pattern. So like I said, we are just going to use the full pattern to cut out the inner part, which is the black chiffon part of this dress, the part that is going to be inner. So it's actually plain, there's no bustier attached to it. So I would move ahead to cut with this pattern now. So here is my chiffon fabric. I placed it on fold, so it's just single. I'm going to cut it out. So I'll fold my paper on fold, place it on the folded part of the chiffon, and I'm going to follow the sides of this pattern and add my seam allowances of 1 inch all over. So I'm done cutting, as you can see right there. So that is the inner part of this dress. So now I'm going to cut out my patterns for the bustier part. So I want you to watch and see how I'm cutting it. So you can see how I'm cutting them. So later I'm going to close up my bust dart. I'm going to apply my adhesive and close up my bust dart. So after that is done, the next thing I want to do is to label these patterns accordingly, so I can be able to use them to cut the Ankara fabric. So but the yoke, I want to also use the chiffon to cut the yoke and keep. So but after I'm done with that, the next is to calculate the flay. So the Ankara flay is a handkerchief flay. I just use my waist plus 2 inches zipper allowance, divide by 6.28, which is standard for cutting a circle flay. So what I have here, I'm going to cut my radius with it. So you use your own radius, whatever you calculated, your waist divide plus 2 inches divide by 6.28, whatever radius you have, just fold your fabric as a circle, okay, as a 360 degrees flay. So you can see how I'm folding it right there. So the fabric I'm using here for this Ankara is just less than 2 yards. So I'm going to take the radius of my flay. So I'll just go ahead and mark the radius I got. So I got 3.5 inches. So I'm marking the 3.5 inches. So the length of this flay is 14 inches. It's a handkerchief flay, so you measure on each end 14 inches, and we'll cut it as a square to give that flay effect. So I'll just go ahead to cut as a square right now after I'm done measuring my 14 inches from the radius. So I'll just go ahead and cut as a square. So here I've cut it as a square. Next I'm going to cut out my radius. So why I have to cut this first is because I'll use the same Ankara to form the bustier part. So it's good you cut out your handkerchief flay first and keep, and use the remaining fabric for the bustier. So after cutting this is what I have, and this is how we are going to attach it. But this part I'm folding is going to be the center back and center front. So the center back area, I will lift up one of the fabric and cut open. I'll lift it up, one of the fabric, and cut open. So I'll just cut it open, so I will have my zipper allowance. I believe you understand. So I'll just cut one single part open, so I'll be able to have my zipper allowance. So that is what I'm actually doing right there. So I'll carefully cut it. Please be careful you don't cut the two, center front and center back, at once. So you can just create a mark to it and open it up and then cut it separately. So that is exactly what I'm doing here. So I have to open the center back where we'll have the zipper area. So that is how it's going to lay on the dress, and you notch the front. So after that, we are going to cut the lining. The lining is just 180 degrees. You also use your waist circumference plus 2 inches, then divide by 3.14 for 180 degrees. You divide by 3.14. So here I have about 9 inches. So that is what I'm marking on my radius. So the length of this particular one is going to be longer. It's going to be longer. For me, I use 28 inches because the full length of the net from the shoulder to the hem is 45. So I remove 15 inches, which is the upper part of the half length. So I have 28 inches remaining. So this is going to be longer. The handkerchief flare is shorter because it's going to be on top. So just go ahead and measure your own desired length and cut accordingly. So this is 180 degrees flare I am cutting for the net part of this dress, and I'm cutting the radius part of it as well. So after cutting it, I'm going to set it aside and make a notch at the center front. So the next is to start cutting my pattern. So I'm done cutting my patterns, adding my seam allowances, 2 inches on the side, half an inch to join the bustier. So I'll create my notch on the under bust. Then I'm going to create my bust padding. So my bust padding, of course, if you have been following me, you know how I do that. I use my pattern and use my pattern radius from the under bust, and then create it accordingly. So this is what I'm doing there. I'm cutting it out right there. I will use it to create my bustier. So I'll repeat the same thing on the both sides of this. I'll use my bust radius all around. Okay, I'll do the same on the left hand side, like that, like that. So make sure you mark these patterns accordingly, because we are going to use these patterns, we are going to use them to form the bustier with our wadding. Okay, so I have cut out one part, and I'm also going to repeat the same process for the other part. So what we are just trying to do here is to create the bustier. So you can go ahead and create the bustier the way you know how, but this is the method I use. So I'll cut these patterns on my wadding and add my seam allowances, and that is what we have right there. Seam allowances have been added, and I'm making mark on the upper part of this, as this can be confusing. So now remember, this is asymmetric, and we are going to place this wadding. We are placing our wadding on the fabric. Initially I placed it on the lining, but I realized it was the lining I was placing my wadding on. So after I finished placing it on the lining, I removed it again and placed it rightly on the fabric. Okay, that was actually the mistake I made. I was supposed to place this wadding on the fabric, but I've already filmed this tutorial and realized that I placed it on the lining. So after doing this, I have to go back and place it on the fabric once again, because that is the right place for the wadding to stick. So you can see me still placing it on the lining, which is the wrong part of where it should be. So after placing on the lining, I'm going to take it off and place it correctly on the fabric. The lining is the black piece, but here you can see I've placed it correctly on the fabric, and I've even used my hairstay to cover it. Okay, so I took it away from the lining and placed on the fabric, because that is the right way. So I'll go ahead and sew the bustier, as you can see. So I'm done sewing the bustier, and I gave it a good press. So like I said, it's actually asymmetric. So this is what I had after sewing. So I also proceeded to sew the lining, but I have to blend up that part. If you notice, when you sew your bustier, sometimes it's going to be shoot out on one side more than the other. So all you need to do is just to blend it. After blending it, this is what we have. So I'm just cutting out the little excesses we have on the bustier. So I also went ahead to sew the lining too, but without a wadding for padding. So I stitched it plain, and I'm cutting out the excess too. So the next thing we are going to do is to place the lining and the fabric right side to right side. Make sure you match all the darts, the pointy parts, secure with your pins, and then we stitch. But before that, I remember that we need to make the parts very firm. So I'm using my stay. So I'm going to use a peplum stay to make it firm because it needs to stand. So I've ironed my peplum stay to it. So right now I'm going to place my lining on it, and then I'm going to secure all the dart points. So make sure the darts are matching to each other accordingly. So here I'm matching them and I'm going to stitch. So I'm done stitching and I'm making a notch. The notch is going to help this dress to turn very well. So after making the notch, next is to go ahead to top stitch. So at the pointy part, make sure you cut off that pointy part so you'll be able to turn it very well. So I'm cutting the pointy part off and I folded it to see if I can turn it using my method. So after turning it, this is what we have. So the next is to go ahead to top stitch. So I'm going to flip all my seams to the part of the lining right now, and I'm going to stitch. I'm going to top stitch to make the dress relax very well, the bustier relax very well. So cut off all thick parts of the joining before you go ahead to top stitch, and that is exactly what I'm doing right here. So this is what I got for my bustier. So next is to give it a good press after top stitching, and the dress front is ready. So I'll move over to the back right now. So I'll go ahead and stitch my yoke first. So you can see my yoke, I added half inch to it. So I'm going to prepare my yoke right away. So there are two pieces of them. That's two pieces. I made lining for the yoke. So by the time I go ahead to stitch now, this is what I got. So next I'm going to place it and make a notch at that 1 inch from the zipper which I marked. So move away 1 inch from the zipper. So I'll place my yoke right now. Of course, you know how to sew this part. So I'll just place my lining on top of it. Make sure the yoke is at the notched area. So after securing with my pin, I'm going to place the lining on top of it accordingly. And I'm going to stitch the lining and the fabric together with the yoke on the inside, the way we usually do that, and stitch. So this is what I got at the back, looking neat and fine. So next is to join the dress. So I'll bring the inner part of it. I created the facing for it. So this is my facing for this particular dress. So I'll just go ahead and finish up my neckline with my facing. So I'll place the facing on top of the neckline and I'll go ahead and stitch with half an inch. So I'll stitch with half an inch and I'm going to also create my notch on top of it like that. So secure with your pin so you'll be able to have a good sewing. So I'm done sewing and I gave it a good press. This is what I have. So the next is to join the neckline of the back and front. So you just go ahead and join back and front neckline accordingly. So after joining the back and the front, the method I use is to flip the lines, the shoulder seam lines on each other. So I'm done joining them. Next is I marked out my shape. I shaping my dress, both the bustier and the dress. So I marked that the line I want to use to shaping it. So you can see me pinning them together. They have to be on the same line, okay? So I placed it on the same line and you can see me pin them. So I've run my stitch already. So normally, since we use that particular pattern that we had the bust dart for, there will be an excess. Surely you have an excess. So the excess is 2 inches because of the bust dart technique. Remember, the inner part of this dress does not have a dart. It's just plain. So that 2 inches, you have to cut it out. So I went ahead to cut out the 2 inches, and that is what I'm doing right here. So after cutting out the 2 inches, the next thing is to go ahead to join the back and the front dress. So I'll flip the back and the front dress. As you can see, I've already marked it, both lining and fabric. We are not doing inseam finishing right here. We are just stitching on the surface. So I'll go ahead and stitch on the line and join the back and front dress. So the back and front dress is ready. This is what we have. I gave it a good press and I set it aside. Now we want to start to work on the down part of this dress. So the down part of this dress has a net, and this is the 180 degrees flare which we cut earlier in this tutorial. So now I'm going to bring my net. My net is 6 yards, and this 6 yards of net came by 60. So what I did is to put all of them together. We are going to calculate length of the two. So the length of the two, I use the shoulder to the length measurement, which is 45 inches. So I've already taken it off 17 inches, which is half of it. So 45 minus 17 will give me 28 inches. So the length of my two is 28 inches. So all I'm going to do is to measure the 28 inches and cut it. So I'll just cut off the net accordingly. I'll place it on fold, and then I'll just go ahead and cut off my 28 inches. Okay, so it's almost 28 inches right there. So I'm using the whole net when placed on fold. So now I'm going to cut it out. So once I'm done cutting it out, next is to begin to gather. So we are going to gather each layer. It's going to have 2 layers, okay, because I folded it into 2. So I'll gather the ends of the 2 right now. So you can use any method of gathering of your choice. Okay, you can use machine gathers. You can also use a hand gathers. So what I did here was to use my needle and thread to gather. So I just put needle and thread and use it to gather. Of course, that one is very easy to get gathers than machine gathers. So here I'm done gathering, as you can see. So this is how I did that. I used my needle and thread and I gathered, as you can see. So the next thing we are going to do now is, after gathering the first one, we are going to sew the first layer. Okay, so I'm just taking my time because the length is actually 6 yards and it's long. So when I gather it, you see how it looks like. So this is the gathers right now. So make sure you put them and make sure they are equal. So I arrange them so that they will be equal. So I bring in my 180 degrees flare right now, and I'm going to place the first layer. I'll just distribute it from the center front to the end of it. Make sure I distribute very well. Then I'll go over to my machine and I'm going to sew them once I'm done distributing them accordingly. So after sewing the first layer, I'll also move ahead to gather the second layer. So the first layer right now is ready, and I'm going to gather the second layer because I actually need these gathers to be full. So I'll also use the same method of gathering to gather. So here you can see it's very full with the second layer. So the next thing we are going to do now is to place the handkerchief flare. So the handkerchief flare right now, I'm opening it up because we are going to lay it right on top of the gather. So I've laid and stitched. This is what we have. So next is to join the upper piece of this dress. So I'm going to join it from the center front to the end, and here is what I got. So the next thing we are going to do now is to close the zipper part. So make sure you measure your zip length. From the waist, I like to go down by 8 inches. So once I go down, I'll put both everything together, both lining, fabric and net. Then I'll move ahead to sew. First, I'll measure 8 inches from my zipper. Like I said, I'll mark. From my waist, I will mark, and I'm going to stitch close the down piece. So after stitching close the down piece, the zipper part will be open. So here I've attached my zipper. You can see what I got, and the dress is almost ready. So we'll move over to the sleeve. So coming over to the sleeve, I'll just measure 12 inches width. I place my sleeve on fold, 12 inches width, and you bring your basic bodice, sleeve pattern and place at that 12 and at the folded part. Secure with your pin. So you can see what I'm actually doing right here. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to add my seam allowances and connect that seam allowance from that point. I added 1.5 inch, or you can add 1 inch, then connect it with a straight ruler all the way, like a bell sleeve, all the way to that 12 inches, because we are going to gather the down part of it. So I'll just move ahead to cut out this particular sleeve right now. So it's actually a simple sleeve, but it's going to have a gathers at the down part. So here I'm going to take off and open up my sleeve, because we have front and back of this sleeve. So I just go ahead and open up my sleeve and place my pattern again and reduce the front parts a little. So you can see the back and front of the sleeve. So you can see when I place them, the front is much, so I need to reduce it a little bit, and that is exactly what I'm doing here. So I just move ahead and reduce it, as you can see. So after I'm done reducing it, this is what I got. So the next thing I'm going to do is to put this, make a notch for the front, go over and gather the down part. So I'm going to my machine to gather the down part of the sleeve, and make sure the down part is 10 inches. 10 inches according to the measurement of your wrist. So I'm going to put it together and sew the sides of the sleeve after gathering. Now I'm done sewing the sides of the sleeve. Next is to cut the flare mouth. So the flare part of it, now I place it like a 362, but I'm going to cut handkerchief flare. So I'm using 1 inch radius, because that is what I calculated with 10 inches divided by 6.28. So I just have 1 inch. So now I'm going to mark my sleeve length at 5 inches. So you can make it a flare. I'm showing you two methods. One, you can make it a flare. Second, you can make it a handkerchief flare. So I choose to make it a handkerchief flare, since the Ankara part is a handkerchief flare as well. So I'll just go ahead and cut out the flare, cut out the radius. So what I have right here, I'm going to use it to cut another. So when I cut another, I'll have 2 pieces. So this is what I got. It's just a handkerchief flare. So now I will use this one, and you can see I measured it. I got 4.5, which multiplied by 2 is 9 inches. So I'm going to cut out two of it, which I've done, then attach it to the gathered part of the sleeve. So I'll just go ahead and place it on the gathered part and follow the gathered stitches and stitch on it accordingly. So we are gradually coming to the end of this tutorial. I'm done stitching. Next is to attach the sleeve to the bodice of the dress, and the dress is ready. So I'll just move ahead and attach them accordingly. So I'm going to sew the sleeve right now, the both sleeves to the dress, and this is how we come to the end of this tutorial. So after attaching the sleeve, you can go ahead and wear your dress. So this is what it looks after attaching. It's actually looking so beautiful. If you have not subscribed to this channel, please kindly subscribe, like this video, share to family and friends. See you in the next class. Bye.